Hi, JN with Hoppin here. Today I'm going to show you how to encode a video to be compatible with Social VR. We're going to use Adobe Premiere, Insta360 Stitcher, and Noisemakers Ambisonic Limiter HD. So first you go into Premiere. After downloading your sources on your computer, you're going to create a new project. So I'm gonna create it in a sub underscore projects folder. It's going to be easier to sync on the network afterwards. I'm going to call that project test 2. We want to make sure that we're using HD video, and then clicking OK. It's not a good sign when Premiere starts lagging right at creating the project. Anyway, okay, so here at the top we've got the workshops, the workspaces layout, so we're using the editing workspace layout, and if the Stitcher, the 360 Pro importer has been successfully installed, you'll see the tab here. So we want to today import stereo video, left eye on top. I'm going to hit import. We're going to go into source files, and we're going to select this one at this time. So it's going to import the file, hopefully. Alright. I'm going to save right away. Make sure that if anything crashes, we won't lose what we've done so far. So now I'm going to edit the stitching parameters. Here I'm going to select optical flow instead of the new optical flow. It seems it's better. I'm going to go with sampling type slow to make sure I get the best result. I'm going to use the original offset, stitching smooth transition, and I don't need flow state stabilization at this point because the camera is stable and steady enough. There was no strong wind, or it was not set at a big height. Then you go into preview stitching effect. Alright, in here I'm going to leave it at the middle. Sorry about that. I'm going to leave it at the middle time frame for the stitching point. But what we want to check is here zenith optimization. Since we don't use the nadir in Hoppin, we think people don't mind looking down and seeing the tripod. But we want to optimize what it looks like at the below and above viewers' heads. So we're going to hit the zenith optimization option here. And we're going to set the reference frame, keeping it to what it was right now. Now that we've used our settings, we can save, and then we go back into our project, and we've got our file that's been imported using the Stitcher. So I'm going to take that file, and I'm going to drag it into the timeline here. And now double-clicking, I'm going to save again. And now double-clicking on the video, I'm going to open it here in the source editor so that I can select my in and out. So previously, going to the preview, I selected what would be a good in and a good out to make a seamless loop once people are inside the VR app. When they reach the end of the video and it loops at the beginning, you want to make sure that it doesn't show too much. So I'm going to go ahead and select, it was 10 seconds at which I noticed it was a good time to start. So, and I'm going to mark it in here. And I'm going to go in the end to, let's say, 1 minute 50. And again, mark. And this time, mark the end of the clip. You'll notice that the clip here has reduced length into the sequence, the timeline. So we're going to bring it back to the beginning. All right, I'm going to save that step. Next step, we're going to adjust the color. So I bring it up here. You can always look what it looks like in VR mode by clicking Enable VR Video. So you're able to turn it around. And when you want to make it wider, you go into VR Video, Settings, and you drag here the horizontal view to the maximum, which is 180. So now you have a wider screen to be able to see what it looks like. But right now I won't be using the VR video because I want to look at the colors. So put it back up here. It's doing a weird effect. Try to see if I can just move it around. Will it fix it? Otherwise, where's the scroll? In the other direction. Let's change flow layout. Come back to editing. Did it work? No, it did not. Okay, well, let's forget about it for the moment. So what I'll do is that I'll also go in the middle of the clip. Yes, so that I have a good sample of the colors. I'm going to go into the color workspace. Okay, now it's fixed. And in the color workspace, I'm going to use the lumetri effect. And I'm going to simply use the auto mode. Clicking auto, your computer will go into processing for a couple of 1 second about, and then it's going to use some settings. That's usually good enough to get a good feeling and something that's going to be coherent across various clips. So now that we've got the color set, I'm going to save again. And now we're going to go and edit the audio. So I'm going to go into the audio workspace, work layout. So what happens here, you'll notice that there are the 4 channels, the ambisonic channels. If you want to listen to the audio and not having it lag, I suggest you close the video while editing the audio. And when you hit play like that, I suggest you go in here, instead of using dynamic peaks, which show the yellow lines down here, you are going to use static peaks, which are going to show you what are the maximums. So now that's going to allow you to see if there's some screeching sound, if what's the usual level of the video clip, and to be able to process it accordingly. I'm going to stop it now. To apply some effects, you come up here and there's a really small arrow, but you click on it and it will open the effects stack. So I'm going to go into the mix, the 4th one, because instead of applying it to each channel, I'm going to apply it to the whole mix. And the first one I'm going to apply is going to be, but I'm going to put it a bit lower because they apply in the order from top to bottom. So one thing I want to apply is the limiter. So I use the noisemaker MBI limiter HD. So I'm going to apply this one. If I double click on it, I'm going to see its settings. And I want to make sure that when there were those wind sounds, that they don't go above -10 dB. So I'm going to apply that here. Now I noticed that the sound is a bit low. I'd like the volume, the peaks to go between 6 and 12. For instance, usually I'll listen to the whole video. I also suggest you wear headphones to adjust the audio. And once you're adjusting the audio, if I want to increase the sound here, I'm going to go ahead and use the amplify so that I can either reduce or enhance the sound. So now I'm going to apply a 3 dB boost, which of course I can check right away. Let's exaggerate it just to make sure it's getting louder and loud. Now that's way too loud, so I'll put it back to the -6 dB. It seems to sound good. Alright, I'm going to stop it here. The other thing that we heard in the background was lots of noise. So I'm going to apply a noise denoiser. That one I go with it sets it to 40. I usually bring it, let's say, to 10, 20, depending on how much noise you need to be reduced. So let's play it. So you will notice the difference here. I can shut it down. So it does reduce a lot of noise. You can use that filter here, which filters out just lower frequencies. Now we hear a kid screaming in the background. That's something else to fix. But let's stick to our plan here. All right, so that seems to reduce the noise efficiently to what I was looking for. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to first apply the denoiser, then it's going to amplify the sound, and then it's going to cap the, the highest peaks at minus 10 dB. We can see here that it's been locked at minus 10. So that's the order you need to push to insert those filters. If you're using 3 of them, you don't need to use the 3 of them each time. You don't need to use any if you don't need to, but these are usually the 3 useful filters I find when I edit clips. So I'm going to save the project again to make sure that I don't lose anything. Now we basically have our whole clip adjusted, and now we just need to make sure that we add the loop at the beginning and the end. The way it works is that we want it to be a seamless loop for the visitors, for the VR users. So the way to do it is we're going to actually do a 10 frames overlap between a copy of this clip. Let's say I go to the end of that clip, go to out. I'm going to copy that clip, copy. I'm going to paste it, Control V, here. So I have a copy of the clip. Now what happens is that if I bring that clip above that one, it means that the beginning of the clip won't be the same anymore because it's going to be chopped by 10 seconds. So by 10 frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go at the beginning of the original clip, and I'm actually going to subtract 10 frame. So if at the beginning of that clip I'm at 10 seconds, I want to subtract 10 frames, so I'm going to go at 10, 10. Now it seems very little, but it is. So I'm going to mark in at that point. So if you remember correctly, it means that I'm not at the beginning of the timeline now. So I'm going to drag the clip back at the beginning to make sure that it's well organized. And then it means that this one is not attached to this one either. So I'm going to drag it. Oh, I dragged it a bit too much. Undo is always practical. All right, so now they're well adjusted. Now I want to go here and do that overlap that I'm talking about. So I'm going to go and make it more precise up to the frame level because I want to reduce it by about 10 frames. And what I'm going to do is unlink those two clips so that I can bring the video above. And I'm going to bring it down by 10 frames. And I want to bring the audio below, and I'm going to bring it here by 10 frames. Okay, now what we want to happen is for that new clip to replace the previous one when it reaches the end. So it means that we want to add a keyframe here in FX Control. We want to apply a keyframe to that point where the opacity of that clip will be 100%. And then when we go back at the beginning of that overlapping clip, the opacity is going to be 0. Now we'll notice that we did integrate the first keyframe, but the second one placed by itself since we're already editing keyframe. I'm going to save just to make sure. Now I want to do the same thing on the other clips. The other video clip, I don't need to do anything because that one will replace it by being 100% opacity at the end of the clip. But the audio, if I keep both audio, it's going to just become very loud at the end here. So I need to do the other way around. So the audio for the original clip, I'm going to put a keyframe here where it's at 100% of its audio level, so at 0 dB. And for this one, I'm going to do the other way around. So that one is at minus infinity, minus 99, minus 999. That enters minus infinity, and it did add a keyframe by itself. Now I'm going to go back to the end of my clip. At this point, I want the lower clip to have its audio at the maximum, so back to 0 dB, and it added the keyframe. And for the other clip, I want that sound level to be at minus 999 or minus infinity dB. So now we're going to have a very seamless. Oh no, we did shut down the video when editing the audio earlier, so let's bring it back open. And so now we're going to have a very seamless overlap between the two videos. Now it doesn't show, but it's processing. It will at some point. Let's see now if it works. Yes, so it's overlapping. It's going to be very seamless. If there are people walking and that disappear at some point, they're going to just fade in. It's going to be smoother. Now we want our actual export to finish here. So we place ourselves one frame before the end, because it's that last frame which is the end. And by doing so, if we mark out here, you see that the highlighted portion actually finishes right where we want it to finish. So we've got now our sequence that is appropriately set. I'm going to save again, and we can go back to fuller view. Now I'm ready to export that video. So I'm going to go here, File, Export Media, or Control M. That's eventually going to open the export settings. Yes. So we're exporting in H.264. Our sequence has been well organized, so we keep it that way. The settings, once you've set it up once, I suggest you save it. So we're going to use the Hoppin setting at full 8K by 8K, 480 megabits per second, 320 kilobits per second for the audio. So we're going to use that, but I'm going to explain the settings anyway. Now we're going to change the output name. When I do the output name, let's go back on the desktop in that folder and let's create an export. I usually export, now for the example, I'm going to export on the desktop, but I usually export straight in our drive so that the upload of the final clip is done once the export is completed. So, but now I won't be doing it for the example. And what I like to do is always write who created. In that case, I did. I'm going to call Gen3. It's in the region Bas Saint-Laurent, and it's at Jardin Métis. And it's actually the Royal Alley. So, Royal Alley, and it's clip 1. And what I like to do, I usually like to keep the source file name, and what I like to do is to say what that clip encoding is. So it's a 7.7K 3D video encoded at 480 megabits per second, for the video, and 320 kilobits per second for the audio. So now I'm gonna copy the name of that file so that in case something happens, I don't have to write it all over again, and I can use that template also for the next files that I'm gonna export. So I'm gonna go into my export folder, click save. All right, now through the settings, you want to keep the maximum resolution, so it's the 8K by 8K. Keep it. I like to check render at maximum depth, though if you notice there's not much difference with your clips, it's maybe going to speed up the process. I like to keep it at the maximum unless I don't have enough time. TV standard, I put NTSC since we're in North America. I don't know if that changes anything, but anyway, that's what I did in my settings. Those are the performance. I'm using software encoding because the computer I'm using does not support hardware encoding. I leave that to the default. And then the only other change I make, two other changes I make. Here I use constant bitrate with a target bitrate of 480 megabits per second, as we just mentioned. It's a VR video, stereoscopic over-under, and it's a 360 by 180 field of view. I also check here to use maximum render quality. Again, everything to the maximum. We want people that are inside VR to feel really like they're there, so we keep it that way. Now for the audio settings, Right now, that version of Premiere doesn't support the ambisonic export, so we're going to keep it stereo, but we're going to come back later in another clip about doing the ambisonic export. So as I mentioned, I'm using 320 kilobits per second for the output in AAC. All right, so we've got our settings done. We're ready to export it, but we want to export many clips at a time. So the way we're going to do it, instead of just doing export and wait for it to happen, we're going to queue it into Adobe Media Encoder. Now my media encoder was already open. I opened it before doing that video, but usually it will take some time to open. Once it's open, it will import all the important information and bring it into here, the queue. So now I have my first clip in the queue, and what I'm going to do is save the queue before going back into Premiere to create another clip. Usually I create all the clips from one project into the same all the clips from the same location into the same project, and keep that always in the same project to do the exports, to do the queue, because if you have multiple projects, I've seen sometimes that Media Encoder fails to find the sources. It's like by using the 360 Pro, Insta360 Pro import stitcher, if you switch projects, it sort of loses itself and it doesn't work. So try to keep it in the same project and then queue all that project, do the export, and you're done with that. So let's say that I've done a couple of clips. I'm just gonna hit play. It's gonna start encoding. It's gonna tell me that it's gonna take a while, and if I have multiple clips in the queue, it's going to be multiple hours, so I could leave the computer running and come back later. If it's a virtual machine, I can start another virtual machine and start processing another project in parallel. That's going to be encoding, and once the other one's encoding, maybe I can come back to this one and that the encoding is going to be done. So that's about it. And yes, the last thing, as I was mentioning at the beginning, if you do the export right in our drive, so in our Google Drive, the upload will happen at the same time as it's exporting, so that once the export is done, you're going to have your file completely already on the network, and you won't have to wait another transfer to once all the encodings are done. And we know that the encodings takes a lot of time, take lots of time, and they're not using the network, so it's a perfect time to do the uploads while it's encoding. So I'm going to stop it for now, and that's about it for that portion. Thanks for watching, and don't hesitate if you have any questions to reach out to us.